Hi everybody, Dr. Mike here. In this video I want to take a look at your skin, also known as the integument. Now your skin is a waterproof coat that you keep for a lifetime. It's made up of a number of different layers and it performs many roles, more than you're probably aware of. Now when you look at me and I look at you, what you're actually looking at is the topmost external layer of our skin that we term the epidermis. So let's write that up here. This top layer that you can see is known as the epi. Now epi means on top of, dermis. Now the dermis is obviously going to be the layer underneath the epidermis. And then unsurprisingly, the layer underneath the dermis is going to be called the underdermal layer, which we term the hypodermis. Hypo means under, hypodermis. It's also sometimes known as the subcutaneous area. Now when we look at the epidermis, it's made up of a number of important cell types and also plays many different roles. So first of which, the most abundant cell that you'll find, which I've drawn up here as multiple layers of squish cells, they're filled with a protein called keratin. And this protein makes this very tough and also makes it waterproof. So let's write this cell type down, very important. It's called stratified squamous keratinized epithelia. Terrible name, but it's exactly what it is. Remember, epithelia is the types of cells that line the outside and inside of our body. All right? It is a barrier that separates environments. Keratinized is simply a protein. Again, it's waterproof and tough. Stratified means many layers and squamous means squished like a pancake. So this layer is many layers of squished cells that are really tough. And again, what's it do? It's waterproof. So let's write this down. I think this is important. It's waterproof and tough. So that's its function. But there's many other cell types. So for example, you've got these cells over here that we term melanocytes. So these are melanocytes. And melanocytes produce something called melanin. Now what does melanin do? Melanin is an umbrella-like substance. Now when I say umbrella-like substance, I mean what it does is when you are exposed to the sun, UV light for example, so you've got the sun, you've got all this UV light coming down, and we know that UV light can be damaging to the cells of our skin, can cause cancers for example. When this UV light goes down and starts to hit these cells, including the melanocytes, it triggers the melanocytes to reach its arms out and release the substance called melanin. Melanin, like an umbrella, surrounds the nucleus of the cells. What's in the nucleus? DNA. DNA is what allows us to make more copies. If the UV light damages DNA, it can increase the likelihood of cancerous cells. Okay? So melanomas, for example, this can be when a melanocyte can become cancerous. But you can also have squamous cell carcinomas, for example, squamous cells, right? You can have basal carcinomas. These are the cells right at the bottom, basal meaning base, right? So this is where it starts to make sense because UV light has damaged the cells. So the melanocytes produce melanin and it covers the nucleus and this stops the UV light from damaging the DNA. So that's what the melanocytes do. Other cell types. This Pac-Man looking thing here, this is called a reticular cell, and reticular cells play an important role because they are immune cells. Reticular cells. Sorry, reticular cells. I meant to say dendritic cells. I do apologize. Not reticular cells, dendritic cells. Dendritic cells. And what dendritic cells do is they play a really important immune role. So they gobble up any invading pathogens, anything that's permeated through or penetrated through the keratinized stratified squamous epithelia. So immune cells. Now a couple of other important roles. You can see that when we look in the dermis, there are certain things that are releasing products out through these tubes. Now these can be sweat glands or oil glands for example, and what that means is they travel through the epidermis. So the epidermis plays an important role in the secretion of substances. Secretion of substances. But even though it's waterproof and very tough, there for protection, it can also absorb some substances. So it can absorb certain hormones like estrogen and nicotine, because we can have nicotine patches, for example. So it does play a role in absorption. It's limited, but it does play a role. Protection. Remember, you have many layers of squished cells. If the cells are squished, it means there's no intracellular compartments. There's no organelles. There's no mitochondria. There's no endoplasmic reticulum or Golgi apparatus, which means these cells are simply there because if they get scratched or damaged or cut, they're dead already. So the top couple layers of your skin is dead. It's there for protection. It doesn't matter if they get damaged. Another important thing you can see is there's no blood supply to the epidermis. So if you damage the top layer, you don't bleed. That's obviously going to be important as well when it comes to protection as well. All right, let's move through from the epidermis down to the dermis. The dermis is where you can see we have blood vessels. So the dermis does contain blood vessels. It contains nerve fibers as well. And you can see some of these nerve fibers coming up here to their sensory ends, which means it's the dermis that plays the role when it comes to touch, pain, pressure, chemicals. So it is important when it comes to sensory input. The blood vessels are important because we know that the heat of our body is carried through our blood vessels. And we can change the diameter of our blood vessels, which will change how much blood gets to the area, which changes the temperature. If we are hot, they dilate, dissipate through the skin. If we are cold, it will constrict and hold on to that temperature. So that means blood vessels play a role in temperature regulation too. Extremely important. Now, the other thing you can see is the glands. So all of these glands sit